Joseph looked down at a message on his phone. Captain Finnegan was requesting that he, Detective Addison, and quite a few uniformed cops retrace their steps with a composite sketch of the suspect in hopes that someone could offer more information. Joseph looked at Briana, who was slowly eating her breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast on an overbed table. He had spent the entire night there watching over her. They had had the occasional conversation whenever she was awake. He had assisted her to and from the restroom on multiple occasions and helped her take her medicine. He had food delivered and slept a few hours uncomfortably in the visitor's chair as to not leave her side. She seemed much more relaxed with him there. He found her to be a strong, intelligent, and brave young woman, and he hated to leave her as he didn't want her to be afraid. "Hey, Briana, I have to leave for work in a bit. I'll have one of the officers come and sit in here with you, okay?" Joseph said softly. Briana put down her fork and looked at Joseph, giving him a dejected smile. "I understand. Thank you for staying here with me overnight. I was able to rest with you here," she said, looking down at her tray sadly. If it's okay with my captain and partner, I can come back tonight," Joseph said warmly. "I would like that. Thank you," Briana replied softly. Joseph called a ride to his apartment, where he quickly showered and dressed. He met Detective Addison at Cypress Lake, where they had found the body of Jackson Lawson. They asked around, showing people the drawing of the man. They visited every location, including the bar where Briana was kidnapped. Some people said he looked slightly familiar, but no one had any information that was substantial. Joseph and Detective Addison headed back to the precinct to complete paperwork, feeling disappointed. Captain Finnegan walked up, his hands on his hips. "Anything new on the skinning case, fellas?" he asked critically. "Not anything new yet, sir," Detective Addison responded in a frustrated tone. "Listen, we can't drag our feet on this." Before Captain Finnegan could finish, Officer Lena ran in, excitedly stopping in front of Detective Addison's desk. "Excuse me, Captain. We have a hit on the ID of the skinning suspect," she said, smiling at Detective Addison. Detective Addison jumped from his chair and Joseph sat up. They all turned their attention to Officer Lena as she explained that while asking around, she came across a man named Zachariah Hoffman, who recognized the drawing as Dr. Andreas Remini. "Doctor?" Detective Addison asked loudly. "Yep, and guess what kind?" Lena asked, smiling widely. "Out with it, Fairchild," Captain Finnegan griped. "Sorry, Captain. He's a plastic surgeon specializing in body contouring and skin removal," she said gleefully. "Great fucking job, Officer Lena," Detective Addison yelled out, causing Officer Lena to blush. "Okay, great. You two pull up everything on Dr. Andreas Remini. I want to know everything about him. I'll get started on obtaining the warrants," Captain Finnegan said, finally looking happy. "Yes, Captain, and then we will pay the good doctor a visit," Detective Addison said, narrowing his eyes. It didn't take long before Joseph and Detective Addison pulled up the location of where Dr. Andreas Remini worked. He was a private practice surgeon that owned his own clinic, the Remini Clinic. His website listed his medical achievements, awards, and years of philanthropy throughout the world. Joseph scrolled down and stopped at the photo of Dr. Remini and colleagues. He was truly a dead ringer for the suspect composite. He was smiling brightly in his lab coat with his dirty blonde hair combed back perfectly. His piercing blue eyes sparkled along with his perfectly straight white teeth. An address and phone number were located at the bottom of the webpage. Joseph wrote them down. "This guy is squeaky clean, not even a traffic violation," Detective Addison said, looking at his computer. "I have his clinic's address. We can go there as soon as we get the arrest and search warrants," Joseph replied anxiously. Captain Finnegan bolted from his office with documents in hand. He headed straight to Detective Addison and Joseph with a smile. "Judge Tanner was available. We have the warrants, fellas," he said, handing Detective Addison the documents. "Let's go, rookie," Detective Addison said, grabbing his jacket from his chair. They hurried out the precinct along with some uniformed officers and headed to the Remini Clinic, which was 40 minutes away from the precinct. They went there, sirens blazing to bypass traffic. They made it there in 30 minutes and walked boldly into the contemporary, off-white clinic. It was quite large, and the front let in a lot of light by way of large, tall windows. The light gray limestone flooring glistened in the sunlight. They pushed through double doors and entered a large room where an attractive receptionist sat at a long white desk with a surprisingly silent, large, flat waterfall behind her. Baby blue pleather seating adorned both sides of the room as two TVs quietly played different programs. Their arrival piqued the interest of the few patients sitting in the waiting areas, who looked at them with puzzlement and concern. The attractive receptionist smiled and stood up as Detective Addison and Joseph walked to the desk, warrants in hand. "How can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked in a polite voice with a strained smile. "Where is Dr. Andreas Remini?" Detective Addison asked coldly, showing his detective badge that was clipped on his belt. Doctor, Remini is finishing up a surgery right now." The receptionist, whose name tag read Claudia, responded nervously. "Bring him out," Detective Addison demanded, narrowing his eyes. "Excuse me, please," Claudia said nervously. Claudia left from behind the desk in a hurry and used a key card to open another set of double doors, which she ran through. Detective Addison had already instructed some uniforms to cover the other exits, just in case Dr. Remini tried to run. They waited there for 10 minutes before Claudia returned with a tall man behind her, wearing a surgical cap, mask, and smock. The smock had a bit of blood on it. He removed his mask, revealing himself as Dr. Remini. He looked surprised and irritated to see Detective Addison, Joseph, and the uniformed cops there. "What is this about?" he asked angrily, his piercing blue eyes glistening. Joseph noticed that the left side of his face contained a scratch that looked like it was on the beginning stages of healing. "Andreas Remini, you're under arrest," Detective Addison said, handing Dr. Remini his copy of the arrest warrant. "What for? What is going on?" Dr. Remini asked desperately as Detective Addison grabbed him and cuffed him. Joseph handed the receptionist the search warrant as Detective Addison read Dr. Remini his Miranda rights despite his protest. Joseph explained they would need access to Dr. Remini's information, schedule, and office. Claudia stood still in shock. The patients in the waiting area all muttered under their breaths, a few pulling out their phones to record the scene. One of the uniformed officers firmly asked them to put the phones away to Joseph's appreciation. As Detective Addison walked Dr. Remini out the door, he yelled back to Claudia desperately. "Claudia, call Mona. Tell her to call Walter and have him meet me at the police station," he yelled. "Yes, Doctor." "Remini," Claudia responded, looking frightened. Joseph obtained the requested information and questioned Claudia before meeting Detective Addison outside. Dr. Remini sat looking dumbfounded and panicked at the back of a police car. Detective Addison gave the go-ahead for the uniformed officer to take Dr. Remini to the precinct as he and Joseph drove ahead. "We got our guy, Detective Addison," Joseph said, feeling strangely numb on the inside. He looked over at Detective Addison, who was quiet with a stoic look on his face. "Detective Addison?" Joseph repeated. "Oh, what's that rookie?" he asked. "I said we finally got our guy," Joseph repeated. I hope so," Detective Addison replied, narrowing his eyes.